Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is for you. We're here in Studio B, and I'll be bringing you a grain of salt. And just had a few things on my mind. Paul over there in Ephesians 4:1, I know I've given you these verses prior, but he says, therefore. So anytime you see the word therefore, read before it the first 3 chapters, and you'll see what Ephesians 4 is there for, right? So he says, therefore I, Paul, a prisoner. Now get that. Paul, a prisoner of the Lord. Now, he would never admit that he was a prisoner of any government, any state officials. Paul considered himself a slave of Christ. In other words, whatever Christ says is what it's going to be. It don't matter what a man says. So Paul, every time he said he was a prisoner, he never did say he was a prisoner of Rome or a prisoner of this one or that one. He was always a prisoner of the Lord. But anyway, he says that he implores us to walk in a manner worthy of the calling wherewith we have been called. And then over there in Romans 12:1 is similar, same writer, Paul. He says therefore. So you want to read the first 11 chapters to find out what it's there for. But he says, therefore I urge you. First of all, he said in the Ephesians 4, I implore you. I'm begging you. I'm urging you. From prison now. From prison, Paul says, by the mercies of God. He's begging you and me, by the mercies of God, that we present our bodies as a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God. And he said, which is our spiritual service of worship. So, presenting our bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, walking in a manner worthy of the calling, these are forms of worship according to Paul. And he said, by the mercies of God. A friend of mine asked me, he said, we were talking the other day, and he and I both just, we struggle. We struggle to do the things that I talk about, by the way. I don't want you to think that I got all this down and my life is just perfect and I am so holy and righteous and above and all that good stuff. And no. And I don't want you to think that I'm an arrogant sort either. I don't want you to, I hope I don't come across that way. I'm telling you, that's the reason I say take everything I say with a grain of salt, because I can be wrong. I'm just presenting these thoughts that I have from the Word, things that, I feel like for instance, talking about this walking worthy, man, I know what a struggle that is. I am with you. I'm right there with you. I'm trying to figure these things out as I go too. And, so having said that, he said, can we do this? And I have that question too. Can we walk worthy of the calling? Well, I think so, or he would not have commanded us to do that. Paul, inspired by the Spirit of God, was giving us a command. So yes, we can. And I want you to know that the reason I believe that we can is because we've been given everything we need in order to do so. Listen to me. I'm going to save you years of heartache and pain. And if you're right in the middle of this, take this with a grain of salt. But you don't need to find somebody to give you a word from the Lord in order to do this. I'm just saying, I lived that way too for a long time. I was constantly looking for a word from the Lord. Just, and you don't need a vision You know, well, Peter got one, and Paul got one, and them boys got one. Yeah, they did. But you don't need one. You don't need one. And you don't need an angelic visitation. Let me tell you something about these things. These things can lead you down a trail of deception, which will in turn to disillusionment. And I tell you, that's a depressing place to be. It's dark there. And, you know, so I want to encourage you to not look for these things. Peter said we have a more sure word of prophecy. We have the word of God. And this is a man who saw Jesus transfigured on the mountain with two other witnesses. And James and John were there with him, saw these things happen. So he said the word of God is much more better than having a vision or a visitation or any of that stuff. So you have everything you need in order to walk as you are to walk, as you're instructed to walk. And I just wanted to pull over to finish this, but I want you to know that doctrine is the foundation, though. You got to have the doctrine of God in order to continue with Him. You've got to be taught of God. And then the walk is to be the equivalent to the restored, renewed, born-again self that you are now. So you need the doctrine of God, the teaching of God, which tells you everything He's given you, and then you need to walk accordingly. It goes hand in hand. And you can't do this. You cannot walk in that transformed life if you don't have the doctrinal truths, the teachings. For instance, Ephesians 4:1 tells you how to do what you've just learned in Ephesians 1-3. Romans 12:1 tells you how to do now, or to do what you just learned in Romans 1-11. And that will catapult you. When you have the doctrine, the teaching of God, it will catapult you into gratitude and thankfulness, which will in turn to worship. And, and you don't need to get this idea that because you have the doctrine of God and you're walking worthy that everything's going to turn out peachy. Remember, Paul was in prison when he was writing these things. So that ought to tell you something, that you're not guaranteed plush and health, wealth, and prosperity. You're guaranteed to pull your britches up like a good soldier and suffer hardship as the Messiah did. No servant's greater than his master. So God bless. I hope this helped you.